Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I hope that you're excited to do some drawing today. What I wanted us to do is dive into drawing tiny treasures and embracing imperfection along the way. The reason that I wanted us to do that is because when we do drawings, illustrations in general, there's like this big pressure to create something beautiful because that's one of the reasons that I think a lot of people make art is because they love art and you love beauty. And so then there's this added kind of pressure that arrives whenever you open your sketchbook. You're like, it's the first page and you want to make something beautiful. And the thing is that when we have this attachment to beauty, then there's also this sort of attachment to perfection. It needs to look perfect, it needs to look beautiful. And the reality of it is that when you do art, whether you're a hobbyist, a professional, or somewhere in between that, there is not a single person who will be able to make art that is always perfect. You're always going to encounter ugliness in your sketchbooks. You're going to encounter wonky lines, weird shapes, and if we don't become comfortable with that in the sense of building a relationship with it that is more grounded in acceptance and learning, then that makes the process way less fun. So that's really my goal today, is to kind of just invite you to enter into the space of trying to create something beautiful, obviously, because that's what we want to do as artists, but to understand that in those moments where you're kind of nervous or scared of the line that you're doing, kind of let that flow away and embrace the imperfection that is in front of you. If you look at like illustrators that are even very well known, for example, Beatrice Alemania, I don't know if you know her. She's an incredible illustrator if you haven't seen her work. And a lot of her drawings are wonky. But what makes it beautiful is that there's this embracing of the wonkiness, this embracing of the imperfection as kind of part and parcel of the character and the identity of the drawing. So I really want to invite you to start practicing embracing your own imperfection, your own character that comes through in your lines. So I hope that sounds good. Let me know in the comments if that sounds fun to you. Oh yeah, I see there's a lot of different people from different places. Lovely to have you here. And why don't we get started? So I think we're just going to start with the sketchbook for now. We're not going to start off with the reference yet, even though we're going to get to that in not too long. Does everyone have their art materials out? If you haven't, now's the time. All you really need is a sketchbook. I have a few colored pencils. I have, my palette because I'm going to be using some gouache. I have a mix of kind of acrylic gouache and regular gouache, but you really only need kind of one sort of lighter color, or you can do a mix of like white or ivory white with a darker color. If you want a second one, you can bring out a second one as well. That could be really fun. What else do I have? I also have some water and a few brushes. But I will say that no matter what art materials it is that you want to use today, that's entirely fine. There's no requirements. These are just the tools that I'm going to be using because I think they're really fun to play with. But if you want to get out your markers or your watercolor, please feel free to use those. So what I want us to do is I want you to start out with grabbing one of your art tools. I'm going to grab my colored pencils. I don't know if you guys are curious to know which colors I chose, but if you want, I can read them out. This is a malachite green. And we're just going to start making marks. And so you can see I have, my sketchbook is open on 2 pages, and I'm going to actually do the final illustration on the right side because I'm right-handed, and I'm going to use this page just to kind of warm up. And this is something, if you're not familiar kind of with my classes, it's something that I really love to do, is integrating this notion of a warm-up, because a warm-up is something that we don't think of often when we're talking about art, but it's actually really essential. And one of the reasons it's essential is it also helps you get over that hurdle of the blank page. Not only that, it also helps you start practicing this notion of imperfect lines. So, I can allow myself to kind of just draw weird lines, and maybe I can try to control them more precisely, but I also invite you, if you've never really tried to be a little bit looser, to test that out and see how that feels. I really love just allowing myself to make different types of marks and scribbling, because scribbling and doodling are the most underrated drawing activity, and they're the one that can give you the most growth. You can also play around with different pressures of your tools. What is it like if I press really hard or not so hard? What if I try to, let's say I'm going to make a triangle, but I decide to make it a little wonky? Can you accept that that wonkiness is just part of the charm of that shape? What if I make another one? That one is a little less wonky. But there's a difference between kind of, sometimes you can do something and then you're like, you panic and you're like, oh, wait, oh no, I need to do that over again. And it's like you're almost like kind of transmitting that nervous energy into your lines. And there's a different energy that comes through when you're like, okay, this is going to be wonky. It's going to be imperfect, but that's just the way it's going to be. Oh, that one broke. Give me 1 second. I actually have a different one that I'm going to maybe use. It is much bigger. There we go. Then I don't have to sharpen it. And that works. I really wanted to use this one because it's like a neon pink, and neon pink is just very fun. So go ahead, allow yourself to kind of practice that kind of like, oh, I'm trying to make a straight line, but my line isn't very straight. I'm trying to make a circle, but my circle is kind of wonky. And if you've been doing more drawing or less drawing, you're going to have more practice. And so it can sometimes be harder to get that wonkiness. But you can still try to explore it by kind of holding your pen slightly differently. All right, so now we're going to bring up our references. I hope you've warmed up a little bit. And the first reference is these beautiful moths. And so we're not going to draw both of these. We're going to actually draw one of them. And you might see this and you might already be like completely panicking, like, oh my God, there's so many different shapes and like textures, and I don't know where to start. So I'll just let you know where we're going to start is we're going to put a little bit of paint on our palette. I'll kind of just show you. I'm putting a little bit of white. And then maybe I'm going to take my scarlet because I want to like maybe make like a very light pink. I think that would be really fun. Oops, get that away. So I'm going to take the smallest dot, like literally the tiniest dot of my scarlet, and start mixing that in. Maybe make it a little bit darker. And maybe that's a little too far, so maybe I'm going to add a little bit more white to it. And I'm just using these colors, even though you can tell this isn't at all a color that's on the in the photograph. But that's where this art making process gets really fun, because we're not beholden to the references that we use, and we're allowed to just have fun with whatever colors it is that appeal to us. So I want you to pick one of these, and you're going to just use the shape kind of as an idea of what you're going to do. It doesn't have to be the exact shape, but I want you to think of the silhouette. Okay, so we're not going into the details. We're really just thinking of the silhouette of this moth. And I kind of automatically just put it in the top left corner, but you can put it wherever it is that you want on your page, knowing that we're going to have several different things on our page, okay? I also want you to embrace the wonkiness of your shapes here, just as much as we did in the warm-up. You know what you might also notice, for example, if you're doing the bottom moth like I am, look at the bottom right of the wing of that moth. Sorry, the top right wing of the moth, but do you see how there's like a little piece that got chewed out by something? And this is just a reminder that no object is perfect. So that's kind of also why I wanted us to look at these sort of tiny treasures, these magical objects like moths and teacups and stamps today, because when you look at vintage things, you might find them really beautiful and magical. And what it is that we find beautiful and magical about these things is their imperfection. In a faded stamp, it's the fact that it's faded that makes it that much more special. An old rusty key, it's the rust, which, isn't the thing that you want to have on a key. But those are the things that really resonate and can feel magical because they reveal the beauty of time passing and the beauty of imperfection. And I think that that's a really wonderful reminder when we're drawing or painting that our imperfections are also worthy and valuable. Okay, so before we go on to the details, I'm actually going to continue on with these references, and we're just going to place a few more objects in silhouette form on our page. All right, just to give the gouache the time to dry if you're using gouache. And I just realized I need my rag so I can dry my brush. And I might switch colors here, so you'll see I chose a few little vintage stamps for you. And for this, I might stay with something really more ivory white, like kind of pure ivory white. And don't feel like you need to place things in the same place as I do. You can play around with the placement. Kate, I saw you ask me what kind of sketchbook do I like to use when working with gouache or other wet media. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm on a constant quest for the perfect sketchbook. I don't know if you are. There are many that I really love for different reasons. I would say in general, when I'm using like gouache, I'm usually using it with other materials. So anything that's kind of like a mixed media material or mixed media sketchbook, I love. This is, if I'm not mistaken, a Pith. Yeah, this is the Pith sketchbook, which I'm not sure you can get it in the US yet. It's more of a UK-based brand. But I've also really loved Etcher. Those are a little bit more pricey, but they have beautiful cotton paper, which is really wonderful for whenever you're doing anything that's mixed media. So I just put my little stamp here over on the right. You could put multiple if you want. And then I'm going to figure out where I'm going to put my teacup. So I want you to look at the different shapes of the teacups here and notice how different each one of them is. You can really choose between these which one it is that you want. And you can see that for both of these, I really went in just immediately with paint. But if that feels really scary to you, you can, of course, just grab like a pencil and maybe just kind of sketch out like the shape or the placement of the teacup that you're going to make. I'm not going to make it like realistic because we're not necessarily here to make things realistic. We're here to make them kind of imperfect and wonky. And so that's what I'm going to do. And I really like the white one at the bottom, the shape of that, with that kind of elegant little handle too. And so the pencil can just give you a little bit of a sense of where you're going. For this one though, I don't want us to necessarily use a white background. You can, of course, if you want, but I think that it would be fun to actually use a pattern from one of the other teacups. And so I'm actually going to give it a very, very light blue base because I think that would be fun. So I'm going to add a lot of white because I still want it to be pale so that I can come and add whatever design it is that I have on it. But yeah, something like that. It looks almost like a kind of faded blue, which matches our imperfection, perfectly imperfect imperfection. And I'm just going to go over what I did to really capture the silhouette. If you wanted to make it so that you can see the liquid that's inside it, you're welcome to do that. Actually, maybe I'll add that in. Why don't I add that in? I think that would be fun. So I'm just going to add another semicircle over here. And then the rest, I'm really just going to come and finish this overall shape. And you might notice your lines aren't straight. I purposefully kind of made my line a little bit more wonky so you could see what that's like. And you can even see that my teacup is imperfect because I didn't make it perfectly symmetrical. You know, there's this side over here that kind of bends out. And then this side, I kind of didn't really do that. But that's okay. I'm embracing that imperfection. Maybe I'll just add a little bit of sharpness at the end, even if I'm not going to make it exactly the same as the other side. And I'm actually going to switch brushes for my round brush so that I can do this handle, which is a little bit more intricate, a little bit more detailed. Yeah, actually, I'd love, the sketchbook question is a great question. So if any of you have recommendations for mixed media sketchbooks or sketchbooks that you love to use when you're using gouache, that'd be wonderful. I usually like to have paper that is on the smoother side, just because I like working with colored pencil on the top of it. And so that's a really fun way of going about it. Okay. And I just realized I didn't fill in the part where the liquid should be. I could decide to leave it like that and just fill it in with colored pencil, or I could actually go in with some more paint. And I think I'm just going to do that just for simplicity's sake, so that we're really staying with the silhouette. All right. How's everyone doing with that? So now let's move on to the next one, and we're going to come back and like kind of fill these in, finish them. I want you to think of where you're going to put your bobbin and where you're going to put your plant. I think I'm going to put my spool of thread kind of over here. And then I think it would be fun if my plant kind of curled around here. That's kind of what my thinking is. So you can see I put a few different spools of thread, but again, you can kind of pick whichever one you want, but you also don't need to stay beholden to the direction in which it is. So even though some of these are vertical, you might want to actually put them on the side. I think it would just be kind of interesting to see what it would be like if I mixed my pink and my blue to make something a little bit more purpley as my base color. Something like that. All right. Thank you for the reference. So I'm going to just place my bobbin. And I really do like the one on the top left. It really is my favorite. So I think I'm going to just go with that one. And make kind of the wonky middle part with the thread. And then that big circular shape at the end. And so you can see I'm really not being very realistic. My shape is completely kind of off perspective. And that's totally fine. Yay, glad you're joining the treasure magic. Even if you're late, you can definitely catch up. And you can always finish, afterwards, of course. All right, next one. So you can see there's an array of different little plants here to choose from. I think I'm going to go for something a little bit more on the blue side, like maybe a darker blue than the one I did on the teacup. Oh, I want to use the same blue, which was my smalt blue. But I think I'm going to just make the base a little bit darker here. And I'm actually going to use, I think, maybe my round brush. Or actually, maybe I'll use this one because this one is kind of in between in terms of size. So I'm going to mix that up with a little bit more of this. And yes, plants can be blue. Who said they couldn't be blue? This is where, your creativity can also shine because you're really in charge of the colors that you create, and the specific colors that you pick might be different than the colors that I pick. And that's also your creativity that's coming through. I was just curious if I made it more of a purpley color. But I think I'm actually going to stay with the blue. Oh yeah, the Royal Talents art creation. Those are really wonderful as well. Totally. They're really wonderful to just allow yourself to kind of just play and have fun. But I would also argue that all sketchbooks should be ugly sketchbooks. Like even your most fancy ones, and at least that's how I kind of see it, is even my more expensive sketchbooks, I'm not afraid, or I allow myself to create, ugly pages like this one on the left, to kind of break that myth that our sketchbook needs to be a portfolio. A sketchbook is actually a working tool. And I know that, on Instagram and on YouTube, sometimes sketchbooks can be a lot of people who show their sketchbooks. It's more like a portfolio than anything else. But I want to remind you that it's really a working tool. And so there is space for all the ugly drawings, the experimenting with textures, the experimenting with colors, it's all fine, lovely to have that as well. So let's come back to our reference. Amazing. And I really like the idea of my plant, and it's not really, there's no plant that really curls in my reference image, but I'm going to make it curl anyway because I really want to make it curl around. So, and this is actually a little too thick. So I'm going to go back to my original idea of using my thin round brush. Oh, sorry. And I just realized that I was making a more controlled movement, but what if I just allowed myself to also just make it kind of wonky? How would that feel? And then what if I allowed myself to make the leaves a little bit loose? How's that feel? And I can look at my reference more closely, or I can use it kind of just as inspiration for shapes. So you can kind of see me doing that here. And you see my shapes, they're not perfect. They're just, it's really about leaning into what is instead of what you think it should be, which is what often happens in our sketchbooks, is that we think it should be something else than what it is. And when those two things don't line up, then we experience a lot of frustration and we judge our drawings and we're like, oh, this is ugly. This isn't what I meant. But then sometimes if you show it to someone else, they'll be like, oh, I love that. And I think that's a perfect example of showing you that you can accept what is. Because when someone says, oh, I love that, even though you don't like what it is that you made, it's because they don't know what you intended. They just see what you've done. Okay. I'm going to actually add a tiny little additional maybe flower or something. So maybe I'll go back to my pink color, which I kind of liked. Oh, it's a little dry. Let me see if I can reactivate it. If you're using acrylic gouache, it kind of dries out if you don't keep it wet or have a stay wet palette. And I'm just going to do a quick little flower over here from those dried flowers in the corner. There we go. And then maybe, what about a few more over here? I really like those kind of little buttons, the yellow buttons. Okay. All right. So now you kind of have all your silhouettes placed along the page. And I will say, we did it in this order so we could really allow the paint to dry. But there's a lot of times where I actually don't necessarily do all the silhouettes before I go into the detail work. There are times where I'm like, oh, I just want to work on, like, let's say the moth, and I'll just create the silhouette base and then the details, and then I'll move on to the next object. But we just did it this way so that we could really allow the paint to dry and so that we could really, have everything kind of laid out in a better way. Let's go back to the beginning of our references, and we're going to work on this moth. So you'll see there's a lot of details here. You might not know exactly what it is that you should focus on. And my invitation for you is to actually allow yourself to simply play with what you see. So you don't have to use the same patterns, or you can use the patterns of the other moth that you saw. So for example, the top moth, I kind of like that big dark shape at the top. And so I'm going to just kind of create some sort of wonky dark shape at the top. It's kind of similar to that because I think that's a really fun graphical element. I like that it can be much darker. But even in the way that you draw, like let's say if you're using colored pencil like I am, you don't need to fill in all the black spots, you know? I also do want to add the moth's antenna because I kind of like that detail. And maybe I will kind of just define some of these wings a little bit. Not very much, but just a touch. I think I might also want to just add a little bit of texture. And I can also allow myself to kind of invent patterns if I want. So I don't see like a stripy pattern, but I just felt like making a stripy pattern, and so I'm going to do that. And I really love this part where you can just kind of allow yourself to play with shapes and textures and details. And you have kind of this base, so it'll kind of bring everything together. It'll increase kind of the cohesiveness of it. I might continue these stripes up to here. And on the bottom moth, there's kind of these funny M shapes, which I kind of like. I find them a little odd. So I like that, and I'm going to bring that in. So I want you to also just notice the things that kind of capture your attention in the textures and details that you observe. Here's another thing that I just realized is I didn't really define the body so much. So what if I define the body just a little bit more clearly, like that? And maybe this doesn't have as much pattern. It's just a really solid thing. But do you see how I'm allowing myself to really just play with texture, and it's okay that it's not perfect? And I also somehow really like these sort of edges. And I really want to bring in some of those edges. And maybe what that'll allow me to do, actually, now that I think of it, is maybe it'll allow me to call attention to the broken wing, this imperfect wing that is so beautifully imperfect. Because everything else is going to be kind of roundish, but there it's going to be kind of square. You can also look at the patterns and shapes of your scribbles and see if there's something maybe in there that you might want to include in your moth textures. I really like giving it this kind of gritty feel. But that being said, if you want and really enjoy having something really smooth, please feel free to do that. There's no obligation for sure. It's really more just about leaning into what we're interested in and accepting the imperfections once they arise, because they will. I can guarantee that there are moments where you're going to be like, wait, what? That's not really, meh. Has anyone felt that yet today? I'm very curious, actually. And for some reason, like I'm even going past kind of the silhouette. I just felt like adding this yellow kind of outline for some reason. So I'm just going to do it. And then maybe it'll be a broken line right where the wing is broken. And finally, I'll add maybe just a tiny more detail of a slight darkening on the top edge as well. Not the whole way, but just a little bit. All right. Let's move on to the next one, our little stamp. So I'm going to do a simple one. I think that it would be really fun to use, because I haven't used my malachite green, and I'm going to do the mushrooms actually that are on the bottom left. I think that one would be really fun. And so again, we don't need to, make it exactly the way that we see it, but we can take the details that we think are important. So for example, I'm going to write down a number. So there's a number 20 here in the corner. And then maybe I'm going to have that kind of, what do you call it? Frame. Which I also, if you just noticed, I didn't put it in the right place. And that's fine. That's totally fine, because we're here to learn to embrace imperfection. And I'm doing the outline on the edge just to make it clear that it's kind of a stamp. And I'm going to bring in these mushrooms. I love the shapes of mushrooms. And I'm not going to do it as exactly like in the image again. I'm really just using it as kind of a starting point for my own creativity. And so these are kind of magical mushrooms, since they're blue and turquoise. They're not the real colors that you see there. And maybe I'll give it a slight yellow background. And then sometimes when you do that, like when you use multiple colored pencils, the colors kind of bleed. And so that's also, kind of imperfection. Like, oh, maybe I didn't want the colors to bleed, but it makes it look more faded. To me, it looks more magical. I don't know if you can see. It's a kind of a little detail, but I kind of like the mixing of the colors. For the teacup, there are different ways that we can do this. I really like the repetitive pattern of, oh, I forgot to say, I wanted to say, I put in a chipped teacup, but if you wanted to make a chipped teacup too, that would have been really fun. An additional little thing to do. So I'm going to actually go in with my malachite green, and I really like the pattern on the top left, but I don't want to use that exact pattern for some reason. I kind of want to change it a little bit. So what if I made it a little bit more kind of like square? I know that would be, it seems a little weird, But I'm going to try that. And I'm going to add in my liquid here. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird liquid. It's like some sort of magic potion. So it doesn't look like as tasty as, some coffee or tea, but it's just the way it is, right? But I do really love this kind of vintage color. So I'm thinking that I don't want to go too hard actually with my malachite. Maybe I'll switch to the light malachite. That's a good alternative. I kind of want to just put a line here. And maybe I'm just going to kind of make that pattern, but a different pattern, just of my own invention, because we are not here for perfection. We're here to explore and to have fun. So I'm just going to come in and do that. Maybe I'll bring in a little bit of this wonky edge over here. And maybe the dish, I'm going to make a different pattern. I don't know if that'll work. It might not work at all. Like maybe I'll make it diagonal or kind of like a super tight pattern. And I'm coming in to double up on my pattern with my other color, just for fun. So you can really just allow yourself to play around with just the colors and the textures. And the fun thing with embracing imperfection is that you get to constantly adjust. So let's say that you come across something and you're like, oh yeah, this didn't really turn out how I wanted. You're like, okay, well, what else can I try to make it kind of closer to something that I might like? And since it's imperfect already, it kind of gives you leeway and freedom to explore a bit more, because you're not as rigid in a sense with the expectation of what it should be. So it's more about the discovery, and that's the part that I think is really the most fun for me in drawing in general, is what journey is it taking you on? And sometimes it's like a really breezy journey, and sometimes it's a more challenging journey. But don't you think that also sometimes the most challenging journeys are the ones where you learn the most and lead to the most growth? So that's just a little thought I want to leave you with. So for example, I don't like how dark my malachite green that I just added in is. And so that's fine. I don't love it. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out ways, can I lighten it? I'm not able to lighten it too much. Okay, well, fine. Well, how do I make it a little bit more balanced in other edges of my drawing? How can I make it look a little bit more included into my drawing and less kind of like a sore thumb, right? Or maybe I want to keep it as a sore thumb, and that's kind of the point too. So there's really different ways that you can go about it. All right, let's do our little spool of thread. And I think I want to make mine neon pink because I didn't use enough neon pink yet. And I'm just gonna go ahead and add a lot of these repetitive lines, and some are round and some are not round, and they're maybe not the exact same width. But I'll add a needle too. And maybe I'll make the eye of the needle a little bit more prominent so I can see that. And I really like the writing that's on these spools of thread, so I can like do some fake writing, you know? And there's also a hole there. And do you see how even my line doesn't follow the silhouette that I made with the gouache? And I'm okay with that. So it's like coloring outside the lines. You're allowed to color outside the lines despite whatever art teacher told you when you were, 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 or whatever, that coloring outside the lines is not the point. I say color outside the lines as much as you want. You can see I'm actually allowing myself to go all out and like I'm really coloring outside the lines. I'm okay with that. You know what? I might add also, just for the fun of it, a little bit of thread kind of spooling out, just because that's fun. And then finally, our plants. So we're kind of on the last little bit here. And I actually want to go in with my dark pencil. And for some reason, I feel like just doing one side of the stalk in dark. I don't know. Don't ask me why. This is where, allowing yourself to just play with things can be really fun. You can come in and add maybe some details on these leaves. Allow yourself to not be perfect about the lines. It's okay if it doesn't match or follow exactly what you did before, because this is where the character of your line can really shine. I didn't mean that to rhyme, but that it rhymed. I should make that like that's the motto of our class tonight, or today. It's kind of the evening for me, but the daytime for you probably. And finally, these little flowers. I think I'm going to go in with some malachite green for the center of this one, and maybe some yellow on this one. And maybe I'll just kind of scribble some of these leaves and let the color bleed through. And maybe for this one, I'll also make these sort of like scribbly things, and I'll simply connect them on a stalk. And maybe I'll add a few more that I didn't put in with the paint. Just because I want to. So there we go. Hopefully you've arrived at something that has embraced all the perfect imperfections that you've put in there. I hope that you've been able to also just kind of learn that drawing can be a journey in itself, and that it's really not necessarily about that result, but it's about how you can modify things as they come, accept what shows up on your page, even if it's not what you intended, and allow yourself to shift with it. So, yeah. I would love to hear how that went for you in the chat. You can let me know. And I guess we'll shift to the talking head. And I'm just realizing it's very dark here because it became nighttime. So I'm going to just try to lighten up my video. Hopefully you can see me a little bit better then. Let me see. I may have missed some of your comments. Let me have a look. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, the neon pink, it's gorgeous. I agree. Love it. This one is a Caran d'Ache neon pink. But I also have, it's the one that I initially was going to use, the Luminous Opera by Holbein. Absolutely love this, but absolutely love this too. I mean, the neon pinks are just, all the neons are fun. Awesome. So, yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I'd be very curious to know how that went for you, or if you have any questions in terms of, um, maybe sketchbook practices that you might want to include. I know that making ugly drawings is one of my favorite ones to include, and that's not often celebrated as being a good practice, but I think it's one of the most beautiful and valuable practices. So that would be one that I would add to your list if you'd like. And yeah, I also invite you to please share your creations. I'd love to see them. For sure, you can post them on the Skillshare Discord, and if you can tag me, or on Instagram as well, and you can tag me at Marie-Noëlle Wurm, and hashtag Skillshare Live if you're doing it on Instagram, so I can see them. I would love to see what you made. You can also add your artwork to the projects tab of my class on Skillshare to get feedback from the community, which is always really wonderful. And all the links and handles are down in the caption in case you missed them or I spoke too fast. You can, of course, make sure to subscribe to the channel, to Skillshare's YouTube channel for more live sessions like this one. And yeah, let me know if you have any last little questions for me. Where do I find my reference photos? Good question. I use Unsplash. Unsplash is copyright-free images, and there are a lot of beautiful images in there. So I think that's a really great one for references. I will say I also use Pinterest as well, and even Google search sometimes. The only thing that I would be careful with when you're using reference is if you stay too close to it, that's when you can have copyright issues. So that's why the copyright free websites are good. And then if you're not using those websites, then you can just, I guess, I would take it as a further invitation to use references in a way that is creative and that brings out your own creativity. Yeah, Louise, it's fine if you just wanted to listen, and if you wanted to do the drawing after this, obviously it's going to be up on the YouTube channel, so you can rewatch it and you can join in and do it then. That would be really, really lovely. I would love to see that. I'm so glad that you guys enjoyed it. Did I miss any other questions? I think. Yeah, so there was the question about the sketchbooks, and like I said, anything mixed media is great. I'm trying to think if there's any that I may have forgotten. Oh, there's a tiny handmade brand that I really like called Odd Orange. She makes beautiful sketchbooks, and they have really smooth pages, which I think, again, is what I look for when I'm working with gouache and colored pencil in particular. If I'm working just with pure watercolor, I want to go for something that maybe has a tiny bit more texture. But for gouache and colored pencil work, I really like the smooth pages. You want me to do another live with teapots? That's a great idea. I love teapots. That's really fun. Awesome. I'm so glad that you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, I would love to see what it is that you made if you did join in. And if you haven't, then please feel free to rewatch and join in as like a second on the second try. So, there was one more question. Susan is wondering the name of the artist who uses imperfect lines. Yes, that is Beatrice Alemania. So Beatrice, Beatrice. And then, actually, if you want, I could actually very quickly show you one of her books. Would you be interested in that? that could be fun. Yeah, could we have the top down view, and I'll just show a few pages. So this is Beatrice Alemania. This is one of my favorite books of hers, On a Magical Do-Nothing Day. And I just want to show you some of these illustrations. So if you look at this, you can't really see the whole thing because we're not completely zoomed out, but it's absolutely stunning. And if you look at it, the perspective is completely wrong. It's like, it's wonky. It's all, you have these ones that go this way, and then these ones that go kind of this way, and then they overlap, but they don't, and they don't get really thinner, but then you have the depths. So she's constantly breaking rules, and that is what gives it its charm. You know, you can see there's a lot of texture. There's nothing that is, or rather, it really goes back to this idea of embracing imperfection and owning the imperfection. She owns all the imperfection and uses it to her advantage as for the character of the book. So let me show you one other page here, for example, where we have this little fun little character, and she's doing a bunch of different things, including making big splashes. And you see the orange color, the neon orange color, or bright orange, it's maybe not neon, that she's using. She's going past the lines, if you will. And that's fine. That's what participates in the feel of this. The bodies are kind of wonky and not perfect, but yet there's something absolutely perfect about their imperfection. So yeah, she's definitely an artist to check out. I love her work. Very textural, not necessarily realistic. And the thing is that I think with our sketchbooks, we often get kind of stuck with this idea of realism, as though realism is the be all and end all. But again, if we want to be super realistic, I mean, that's fine. Absolutely. Like, that can be a wonderful goal. But also, you could take a photo, you know? Why is it that we want to represent it with our art? Because we want to have that experience of using our art materials and seeing what arises, and maybe using different colors and different textures and bringing something out that we didn't have before. So hopefully that this session will have given you a little bit of a sense of that. And what I really hope is that it kind of, for me, it's okay, it's going to sound weird the way I say this, but it's really a training in bravery. Because being confronted with, the ugliness or the wonky lines, it can be scary. And so when we practice really embracing that, we're really practicing bravery as well. And so that's what I hope that you've gotten from today. So thanks so much for tuning in and creating with me. I can't wait to actually pop into the Discord and the project pages also on Skillshare, obviously, over the next week, and see what you've done and have been inspired to create, whether you did something similar to me or something completely different. I'm actually very curious, and like what colors you used and the textures and where your special wonkiness entered into. Thank you so much for everything, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the class and Beatrice Alemania's work as well as inspiration. I'll see you very soon.